Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Press Break podcast. I'm Chelsea Late, joined by my co-hosts, Jamie and Tyler, of course. We are going to dive into talking about Power 4 conference tournaments. They were bonkers in the best way, entertainment, upsets, real hoops. We're going to hit on, our favorite parts, maybe some questions we have going into the tournament. As we're recording this, the tournament bracket isn't out, so it's kind of hard to look too far into the future. But there are definitely some things that we took away from these conference championships and tournaments as a whole that we're taking into the NCAA tournament. So we're going to start with the ACC because that one was wild. Like, it was so entertaining, upsets, all of that. And Duke ends up winning the ACC championship, which I did not predict. I don't think many people predicted, but in the end was just like such a display of good hoops. Like, Duke is a team that we know is going to play defense, and in return their offense isn't always the most powerful, but in the end it's their defense that makes up for that. So that ended up happening, but their offense also surged in the final. So it was very entertaining to watch. Tyler, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Because, I saw you on the timeline talking about Duke while it was going on. So
I do be on the timeline.
we'll be on the timeline. So give me your thoughts on that Duke final, and then we'll kind of talk about the tournament as a whole. But that final was a game.
Look, you mentioned it. I ain't never seen Duke's offense act like that before. That second half, that's not normal. But I don't know what the percent, like, they ended up shooting, 45% from the field and 47% from three in that game. Majority of that came in the second half. Like, I don't know exactly what their second half percentage was, but like it was above 50%. Like, I'm pretty confident. I remember like hearing about that on the broadcast. Like, I don't have it in front of me, but regardless, they couldn't miss. Like, it was like, again, that is not what Duke is known for, right? And I mean, if they even have a semblance of that level of offensive production as they head into the March Madness tournament, NCAA tournament, I mean, there's really no telling like how far they could go. Now, do I expect that in the same way? No, because I mean that was frankly like an anomaly in the way that they got it done. They have like players that can score, but they don't pop off like that. Not in the way that we saw in that second half. So I was incredibly impressed. I mean, for me, the fact that they have like the scoring that they did, and it was really not without Toby Fournier, was like pretty shocking to me. But it is to me a good thing to take away if you're Duke, because like you can get this offense rolling without it having to necessarily be Toby. Now, I've been big on the fact that like I just want to see Toby unleashed, frankly, and I've wanted it all season. I don't think I'm going to get it this season, but like that's what I've been wanting this entire season, because they've lacked the offensive firepower at times. But that has just been Duke. Like, that is Duke. They are a defensive-minded team. They are willing to sacrifice, like kind of having a little bit of redundancy on the offensive end and like what players are able to do in order to be the defensive team that they want to be. And that's what they've done. But in this game, you come back as well. You're down by 14 in the first half, and you end up winning this game by 14. Like, that is a massive swing to be able to do. And we could talk about NC State as well, like, after. But I think you saw, like, you saw the deficiencies in Duke in the first half a little bit, like what can kind of be problematic at times with them. But then in the second half, you saw like what to me might have been the best Duke performance that we've seen. I can tell you how long, when it comes to having like both sides of the ball really rolling in the way that they were. So I was incredibly impressed. I'm not like setting this as like the standard for Duke performances, because like this isn't what we've grown accustomed to with their offense. But again, if they have the defense that they have, the baseline of that, the foundation of that, and can get to any semblance of this with consistency in the NCAA tournament, Duke becomes a very, very dangerous team to potentially see on your side of the bracket in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, Jamie, like, coming from someone who like obviously knows a lot more about like the X's and O's and the coach's perspective on the bench, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what did you see from Duke to have that 28-point difference from first to second half?
I mean, it's really impressive, first of all, to have not just a big swing in the positive direction, but to dominate in an equal or even more so manner than you were getting hurt in the first half. Especially with a team that has a good bit of experience, but maybe not experience shouldering the load that each of these individual players have this year. And then to have some youth in there, to have, you know, as we keep talking about, a player like Toby Fournier, where maybe she wasn't doing a ton of the scoring, but obviously she's so integral to what Duke is trying to do. And so to have that youth, to have that in some ways lack of experience, at least at that level in those situations, and to be able to make that turnaround is really impressive. It shows why so many people are wanting to go play for Kara Lawson. It shows why she wanted to stay at Duke when she was heavily rumored to be taking the Tennessee job last year. And it really just shows the kind of culture they've built there. I will also say that it's always funny when you say, yeah, you know, I don't think a lot of people predicted this. Well, yeah, because ESPN was sure running their analytics into the ground of who has the whatever percent chance of winning the tournament without any explanation on how they arrived at that number or what that exactly means or where it's coming from. Thank you, ESPN. We love absolutely no context for our analytics. Regardless, Duke, man, I mean, you look at like their offensive rating in the second half, we're talking an entire half at right around 140 for a team that is, as we keep saying, very, very defensive minded. And so usually you would think, okay, so these are points coming off of turnovers. These are turning your defense into offense, which is something that we hear from another ACC team that we're going to talk about in a second. But that wasn't the case. Duke only had 10 points off of turnovers in the entire game. And even that usually is a little bit of a skewed statistic because it's not exclusively off of live turnovers. It could be you force a dead ball turnover, you're coming back the other way, and that really doesn't impact much. So that's my, you know, gripe with the way that points off turnovers are counted. Not really relevant right now. But it's so impressive to do that, to have such significant scoring off the bench where, not that that's shocking since Duke is another one of those teams that really brings some heavy hitters off the bench, but that was so consistent. And so when then you got a little bit more into the rotation and you got people that were really, really performing at a high level. I mean, the big difference in the second half was rebounding, which most coaches will tell you is effort-based. So for Duke, when you're rebounding over half of your misses, you're probably going to be pretty successful on offense. And then when you're not allowing nearly as much of that on the other end of the floor, it's going to give you such a massive advantage. And so when you're getting so many more opportunities, so many more good opportunities, and you're taking advantage, that's huge. And then, I mean, especially what I look at is in the third quarter, each team took only 3 3-pointers, 2 for 3 on Duke, 1 for 3 on NC State. The difference is 2-pointers, where Duke took 13. NC State did take 12. And so they were getting a roughly equal amount of opportunities to score. Duke's making 8, NC State's making 2. And so that's where you have that split, where not only are you playing terrific offense and really scoring at a high clip, but you're playing the best defense of the game at the same time. And that gets really demoralizing for opposing teams. So it was just kind of a beatdown, especially in the third quarter. And they got all the momentum swinging their way. And especially when you're playing back-to-back-to-back games, really hard to bounce back from that.
I think NC State wore that too. Like the feeling of the beatdown in the second half, like the vibe shift from NC State, like if we wanted to kind of to pivot over to them for a sec, like I think we saw the best of times and the worst of times when it comes to what NC State can be in the NCAA tournament. And they had been, and we talked about on here, like they had been on the rise. Like, I mean, I didn't feel like I wasn't like incredibly impressed by them in non-conference play, and yet they kind of just steadily continued to get better over the course of the ACC play. And as we kind of reached this point, I think that, again, like this was the best and the worst of times. And you could see just how good NC State can be, where they can go against a defensive caliber of Duke's and be up 14 in the first half. But then on the other side, when shots aren't falling, then what, right? And if you aren't being able to get rebounds, because, Jamie, I completely agree that I think it was an effort thing, but also you're relying a lot on a freshman big in Tilda Trigger for NC State. Like that, you are basically telling her to go be your rebounding, and that's a lot. Like that is a lot, and especially as you get into the NCAA tournament where you're seeing different styles, you're seeing different amounts of size. Because obviously the ACC is not known for their bigs. Like that is not, the ACC is a guard league in that manner, generally speaking. And when you go against some of these other schools that you could potentially be matched up with, I mean, the rebounding might be an even larger factor. Because it's not like Duke has like some incredible size either. Like not anything like major that you might see like in the SEC or anything. So it's like that's where the effort comes in. But again, I feel like NC State's also asking a lot of a freshman in that way, and to just be down there and just body up and get boards, and that's a lot. And when the shots aren't falling, all of that, to Jamie's point, I think it's very demoralizing. And again, I felt a lot better about NC State in recent weeks than I did at the beginning of the season. But I think there's certainly enough to worry, like enough substance here to look at NC State a little bit more sideways about I think the floor and the ceiling are for NC State potentially like one of the furthest for any team in the nation right now. Like they could crash out very early, I feel like, or could go very deep, and it all just depends on how that perimeter offense is really humming, I feel like.
Yeah. And that's something that I think that we see a lot, where that's part of what we can't even get into right now, is that a lot of these teams we're going to talk about, it is so matchup dependent.
Yep.
A lot coming from the ACC because of how distinct their style of play is and how different it is to the other power conferences. But there's a couple teams outside of there as well that you look at it and you're like, well, yeah, there's a good chance you're okay. But if you come up against the exact right, or from their perspective, wrong matchup, you could have some issues.
Yeah. Speaking of freshmen, I wanted to get this off because conference awards also came out last week. These two are smiling because they didn't know what's coming. But while we're talking about the ACC, I just kind of wanted to give a shout out to my girl Toby, who were ACC Freshman of the Year over here. First team, all freshman team. I got these props this week. If you're listening on audio, I have a bunch of Canadian flags because, look, the Canadians are hooping. And
they are.
We got to talk about it more, even though I talk about it all the time.
You talk about it every episode. What more do you want us to do, Chelsea?
Get the flags!
What more do you want us to do?
Guys. But anyway, yeah, Toby, like we said, she didn't exactly pop off in the final game, but she did what she had to do. And it was some of the other players who stepped up on offense, which is great. But I mean, Freshman of the Year, and she's a household name in Canada, so people knew that she was going to come do this. But yeah, just really nice to see her win a championship. We got a Canadian as an ACC champion. But another team that has a Canadian that maybe we got questions about is Notre Dame. Shout out Cass Prosper, Canada. But also, Notre Dame gets kicked out in the semifinal of the ACC tournament, which is shocking. And first of all, they get kicked out by Duke, who back-to-back upsets Notre Dame and then NC State. Then, like, this Notre Dame game, it was happening amidst like a Michigan USC semifinal. There was just so much going on, and Notre Dame just fizzled. Like there was like you could just see it happen. There was like the energy just completely came out. They get knocked out in the semifinal despite being the number one team in the country mere weeks ago. And I think everybody just has a little bit of concern now about this Notre Dame team, who has been a national champion favorite this entire season. And now we're getting to the time where it really matters, and you can kind of see them fizzling out. So I'm curious. We'll start with Jamie this time just because, we'll switch it up. But like when we talk about specific concerns when it comes to this Notre Dame team, specifically when it came to the ACC tournament, you could even kind of throw in the fact that they lost twice in the last few weeks of regular season play. Yeah. Like this is the time where you have to be stepping up, like teams, like other teams are, the USCs, the Michigans, the NC States, the Dukes, whatever, are going up, and then you have Notre Dame that kind of seems to be going down. So Jamie, what worries you about Notre Dame?
It's hard because again, this is a team that has a lot of really great things about them and a lot of things that they could really take advantage of over other teams. But especially as the season wears on, you start getting film on teams, and that's this is a pretty common phenomenon where if you have a team that either is upset or really underperforms in a game where it's not anticipated that they should, it's pretty common to see some other struggles in very quick succession. And a lot of times it's not so much because, oh, they're just down in the dumps, oh, they're out of energy, oh, they're whatever. It's because the other coaches are looking at what worked in that game for their opponent and they're mimicking it and they're adapting it for their system. And so for Notre Dame, I think what really jumped out in the NC State and Florida State games back to back were that if you have elite rim finishers, whether that be because they have such great handle, because they have such quickness, because they have even height, length advantages over the perimeter defenders of Notre Dame, if you're able to just put your head down and get to the rim, that's a massive advantage. And obviously that's not news going up against a really elite defensive team, but the way in which teams have exploited that has been a pretty big jump from what we've seen in the rest of the season. And so when you have, your backup defense is Kate Koval, who's a freshman, who's fairly inexperienced. You have Leah King, who is a little bit undersized. You don't have a quote-unquote rim protector behind you. And then you've had several games where Hannah Hidalgo gets in foul trouble. You've had, games where it's more having to fall on Olivia Miles because of that. That's just where we're pretty consistently seeing a pattern in the games that Notre Dame is struggling in. Now, getting some time off, getting a week off, getting the opportunity to get healthy, recharge, all of that, really focus in, that's massive. The interesting thing is to see the sentiments post-game from Notre Dame being that it is all on their defense, which that's what I focused on so far. But that's because that's the thing that usually, even if they're struggling offensively, their defense is so stingy, so solid that they can have a little bit of an off offensive night and still be fine. The offense has more consistently not really been there. The biggest difference has been the defense, but the bigger concern to me has been the offense, because even in games they've won, even in games they've performed terrific, it hasn't always been where you would like it to be, where it has been over the course of the season. Some of the decision making just isn't there. Some of the flow just isn't there. And so that's where you say, all right, there's some concerns on both ends of the floor, and Notre Dame is really attributing it to, we have to be better defensively. We have to be better defensively. We have to turn our defense into offense. Okay, but what if you're not? Then what? Then what's the offensive plan? Because as of right now, we haven't really seen one in the half court.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I'm looking at the half court offense. Because to me, frankly, I think it kind of starts at the head of the snake. And I have very high expectations for Hannah Hidalgo because she is one of the best players in the entire nation. And I feel like there's been several times in games where, whether it's just forcing shots or bad decision making, like on the playmaking side, like it's started to kind of become a trend over the past month or so. Like however long these kind of losses have come together, it's felt like a common factor, generally speaking, with that. And I also think to Jamie's points, the post game comments were like, yeah, I think it was Hannah being like, yeah, we're not the team that beat USC right now. Like we're not the team that beat UConn. And I'm like, whoa. First off, we normally don't hear that out loud. You might be saying that inside, but we don't normally hear that. So the fact that that's even made its way publicly is like, hold on a minute, what's the vibes are off, right? And I to me it starts with your two guards. I mean, Hannah Hidalgo. It's kind of like the contradiction almost of having a star player, because when you have a star player, they can make decisions that end up working even though they are bad decisions. And or shots that like you shouldn't take, and then they make it, and you kind of just have to laugh and keep it pushing because like what are you supposed to do, right? And Hannah Hidalgo was one of those players that has had plenty of those moments, and I say that complimentary, like she's that good. But when those shots aren't falling, when the finishes at the rim, where she's able to twist around defenders and everything, it goes from a laugh of appreciation, like how does she do that, to if it's a miss, it can kind of mount up a little bit and be like, okay, like we got to try something different. And to me, and I think it's honestly, it's probably a little bit too late in the game for this, but I think in hindsight, I would have liked to see Sonia Citron be a little bit more active in the half court offense, because I think that she has kind of been forced into this 3-and-D role. And I'm also very high on Sonia, frankly, but I like for her W prospect and everything, but I think that she has a deeper bag offensively than we've seen. And in the half court offense, and I think that there could have been a little bit more variation in this half court, where instead of it's kind of like, okay, Hannah or Olivia, what do you got? And then we kind of pivot from there. I think that there could have been a little bit more variety within that. And I think now when you kind of have your guards going through struggles, or if the playmaking and the decision making isn't there, that's where it rears its head a little bit, where it's like, I don't know if those two aren't operating in the way that we know that they can. Again, we've seen it this season. So like I wouldn't be surprised to see them get back to that level. But just in this month or so, these last couple of weeks, like that to me has been the problem in the half court, where it's like I have not been I don't feel like Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo have been playing up to their standard. And I'm sure that they would tell you the exact same thing in that way. So that's where it starts to me, is kind of at the head of the snake, and the, I don't know if it's the allowance of like them, to kind of not do whatever, because I don't think that's what's happening. I don't think there's like no system or anything in place like that. But like there's a lot of freedom for both of them, and they kind of just live or die by that right now. And again, normally that's where the defense can kind of pick it up and solve that. But when the defense isn't working, like something has to change, something has to fix itself, and we haven't really seen that from Notre Dame.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what we said about UConn, where two stars are not a system. And that's kind of where I think Notre Dame is right now, where they just need to get back to the basics and emphasize a little bit more of not even so much structure, because that's kind of antithetical to the way that they play, but just re-upping the options and re-upping the full team kind of cohesiveness, as opposed to Hannah, Olivia make plays, everyone else make plays off of that. It's
reacting. Yeah, it's you are reacting off that. And I mean, what a terrible time to have questions pop up that you need to answer. Like if it was like just the regular season and then they won the ACC, or if they had won the regular season games and like then lost here, like it wouldn't be as big of a deal in that way. But we've now, like, it's becoming a trend of struggles. And again, going into the NCAA tournament with question marks and newly discovered question marks, pretty much. Like, like these are not problems that we saw at the beginning of the season. I mean, again, Notre Dame, Chelsea, as you intro this, has been a national championship contender, a favorite at times to win it. They obviously have the talent. We have seen them at their best and how good they can be. But, I mean, when you talk about teams that the vibes are not good headed into the NCAA tournament, I mean, Notre Dame is probably potentially at the top of that list right now.
Yeah, well, and I mean, to kind of see the other side of your point, like, yes, this is kind of the worst time to have questions, but at the same time, you have maybe the longest stretch, other than like a bye week, of time where you get to kind of go back, watch film, address these issues, and you have them fully laid out. Like, you have your whole season of film to watch. You have now a week plus, like over 2 weeks almost, to go back and to watch the film, to, practice, to change things if you need to. I mean, you can't really change the whole system because,
and they shouldn't. And they shouldn't. That should not be what they're looking at. They just need, it's the tweaks that need to happen.
They need to tweak, but like, this is a great time to have so much time off. And then you also get the extended time off because, I mean, you got kicked out in the semifinal, to go back to basics, like you said, and to, try some things and to try to lock in again and to kind of give yourself like a refresh. And you have kind of the pain of losing before you were meant to in the ACC tournament. You were the favorites, and now you have all this time off. So I do think that, like, while it is a bad time, like we're saying, to have these question marks going into the tournament. And yes, you don't have time to test them before you get into the tournament. It is a nice chunk of time off to just kind of reset, rest a bit, get some good practice in, get some treatment in, get film in, especially, and just kind of like get back to what you were going into the season. So, I mean, it's just like, it's pros and cons. Like there's good parts of it, there's bad parts of it. But I mean, if there's any time to have a big break, I think it's now for them.
Yeah, they need it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's flip to this SEC now, in what I'm calling the coin flip rematch game.
Yeah.
Because we got it. We got Texas and South Carolina in the SEC final. South Carolina wins it. And it wasn't really a game, let's be for real. Like South Carolina dominated from
the death machine is back.
And it's like,
they're back. The buzzsaw is back.
And it's like that team. Oh wow, I did say flip to the SEC. Thanks for that one, Brian. Coin flip. But yeah, it's like this team, when they are at their best, they're a bulldozer. Like I was watching this, and it's like Chloe Kitts is going off, Malaysia Fulwiley. Tessa Johnson has her times that she's popping off, and it's like every part of that team, every single player knows exactly what their role is. They know exactly what they need to do. The defense is suffocating. The offense is even more suffocating, and it's like that's why I feel like we get so shocked when South Carolina has their off days, because you know what their ceiling is, you know what their potential is, and it's to absolutely crush teams that are number one in the country, apparently. So it's like, I watched this team and I'm like, who beats this team when they're playing like this? And I mean, the thing is, obviously we've seen this year, you don't play like that every single day. It's just impossible. You have the days like the UConns and the whatevers. But yeah, it's just that team, to me, I'm so curious if there is a team that can beat them this tournament. And last year, that was the question as well. The answer was no. The whole thing was, will Caitlin Clark beat them? The answer was no. And now, with like a pretty similar team, with like an evolved Chloe Kitts and all the other pieces they have, the question's the same. I'm like, who's gonna beat them? And so they won the SEC tournament, and I think the question is like, Texas is gonna be a number 1 seed. You can say about that what you will. I had a tweet about it that lots of people were not happy with, but I stand by my thoughts. Tyler, what do you think? Because you've obviously been watching SEC basketball all season. Can South Carolina lose?
I think they could lose.
Yeah.
But I think that they look phenomenal right now. Yeah. I mean, I think that going back to, obviously the dialogue really started with South Carolina when Ashton Watkins went down. And there was not that immediate dominant big inside that pretty much South Carolina has had for a decade. Like dating back pretty much to when Asia Wilson stepped on campus, they have always had some remnant of a dominant big, generally speaking. And the way that Chloe Kitts and Sanaya Fagan stepped up and have just continued to improve over the course of this season and have taken especially those next steps in the SEC tournament, I felt like especially. Like the way that Sanaya Fagan was knocking down those mid-range jumpers, I was like, okay, like these like it's very different. It's not the same as when you have a dominant big. And so like if you come up against the UCLA again, and we're going to talk about them as well and how Lauren Betts played in that final, but like there's still like unique challenges that normally South Carolina was the one giving to teams with their size and everything. But I say all that to say, like they went from like, I mean, they are in the upper echelon, like they of national championship contenders. They are probably number 1 right now. Like if they're playing like that. Again, I mean, it felt like just everyone has evolved over the course of this season. Joyce Edwards has gotten comfortable in her role. Malaysia Fulwiley is really starting to come into her own. It wasn't like the best game in the final, but just over the course of the SEC tournament, like she's coming to her own. Tessa was phenomenal in the final. Like there's just a lot that South Carolina can throw at you, and it's different from past years. It's like again, you don't have that dominant big. Where I think that's what like the thing that makes me I don't know if nervous is even the word, but like if there was to be something with the South Carolina team, like in the past years, it had been their 3-point shooting, right? And then last year they fixed that up, and you still had the big, and the big was always a safety net. So even though you added the 3-point shooting, you still had like that safety net. I don't know if South Carolina exactly has like their safety net big in the way where Camilo Cardoso was last year.
Yeah.
And so like if stuff gets like kind of wicked there in the paint, that's like the one like hole you might be able to poke in this still. But I say that to say I don't know if there's any teams that can do that with the way that Chloe Kitts and Sanaya Fagan are playing right now. And then you're bringing Joyce Edwards off the bench to just like to bring that up even more. And the perimeter defense has been great. Like I mean, there's a whole lot to love from the South Carolina team right now, and they are playing their best basketball. It seems like they have. I think the UConn game. I don't know if it woke them up. I don't know if that is exactly like what happened, but I think that since then we've seen them playing their best.
Yeah, Dawn Staley did say, I think it was at the beginning of the tournament, that her team has lost at all of the right times this season. That was like the quote from her. And like, I think that is to your point where like the UConn game, everybody was like, oh, like, you know, they had that UCLA loss. That was at the beginning of the season. Completely different team now. They're unstoppable. And then UConn just kind of comes and like has their revenge game, I guess, if you want to call it that, or, you know, the AZ FUD kind of spectacular. But I think that was another right time for them to lose. Just like we'll talk about it. Like I think USC losing will benefit them in the future. Like stuff like that where like the loss can kind of propel you to go forward. But yeah, I wanted to highlight that from Dawn Staley because she did say that going into the SEC tournament. And the other thing I wanted to mention is just like the Chloe Kitts spin fadeaway jumper is chef's kiss. Like beautiful. Like I watch her and like I do think that she may see a little bit of trouble up to like the Lauren Betts or like the other very like strong dominant bigs in the nation, just because she is a little bit like smaller as opposed to say like Lauren. I mean everyone's smaller as opposed to Lauren Betts, let's be real. But when it comes to just being able to like operate and do what she does best, oh,
I mean, look, Texas has size. So like we saw her do this against size. Now again, like I mean, we're comparing it to Lauren Betts, who, you know, is the best big in the nation. So like, you know, like that's like, I mean, you could kind of say anyone's gonna struggle against her, but like they did it against size. So like even though like I still like, if I was like to place any type of worry on South Carolina, that's still what I would like do as that. But like just having size isn't enough. Like your size has to go out there and dominate. And we didn't see that from Texas in this game. And because of that, I mean, honestly, I felt like their size at times was even like not exposed, but like the mid-range jumpers made it so incredibly difficult for their size, you know? So like that is now something that with Sanaya Fagan knocking it down just completely changes the entire offense for South Carolina. And so like, again, like I would say like, I guess when I look at the bracket, I'll be like, okay, like, is there any like major size that South Carolina can run into at any point? Like that'll probably be like one of the things I'm looking for. But again, I say that knowing that is not a guarantee by any means, nothing close to a guarantee that you still end up beating South Carolina. It's not that simple. They are truly back. I feel like even just from a mentality standpoint, they remember that they are South Carolina and like the way that South Carolina plays. And I mean, absolutely dominant.
It's funny even saying back because like two losses.
I mean, that's just the standard of South Carolina. Like if you lose, like I mean, when you go undefeated and win the national championship, a loss is monumental, and another loss is even crazier. So like it's
the big thing with rankings this year too is that like you lose or you win against South Carolina and suddenly you're capable of being the top. Like that was the measure this year, which was kind of wild because like it wasn't really reciprocated the other way. But like I don't know, it was just like rankings to me are just kind of like convoluted.
That's a whole different conversation,
yeah, but it was like the standard of being the best this season was, can you beat South Carolina? And then that's just like wild to me. And that's like a very simple way to describe the dominance of this team. So yeah, it's wild. Jamie, what do you think?
I mean, I will say that to the point of the post play on South Carolina, the big thing is just that they present such a matchup issue. That's, I mean, exactly what Tyler was saying, which is that, okay, so you have size. Well, are you going to be able to guard our post players who can guard you, who can bang a little bit, who can make your life difficult, but they're going to face up to the basket. They're going to stretch you to the high post, to the short corner, to the perimeter at times. And so that just makes it really, really difficult because of the versatility of South Carolina, basically from top down. When you talk about Sanaya Fagan stepping out and hitting shots from outside, that changes the entire complexion of this team, changes the entire defensive scheme against them. And so that's what they do so well, is they evolve, and Dawn Staley evolves and sees where there's holes that can be poked, and she stitches those up mid-season. And so that's where, I talk about this really frequently, and it's obviously echoed by the coaches, which is that if you think that your team has extremely high potential, if you have championship aspirations, you should not be crashing out over losses. Like, you should be saying, okay, this is great. This is an opportunity to see what got us here and how do we fix that for the next time. Because during the regular season, that's literally the entire point, is if you are trying to go for a championship, the wins and losses in the regular season are to put you in a good position for that. But it's not everything. And so, especially when you're still going to put together a resume good enough for a top 1 or 2 seed, great. You've been exposed to something that was a struggle and you can work on it. And I don't think that many teams work on it and figure it out much better than South Carolina. And so that's where they are right now. They've had a couple losses under their belt. They have really looked at what went wrong, what went right, and integrated that into their approach going forward. Then on the flip side of that, you have a Texas team where when they lose, it's kind of the same thing over again and over again and over again, where you have the literal dead last 3-point attempt rate in the country, and teams play you accordingly. They pack it into the paint. They defend the hell out of you in the mid-range. They really make life difficult for penetration, especially against, an elite defensive team like South Carolina, where they can match you up one-on-one. They're not having to commit a bunch of resources to Madison Booker, to trapping, to trying to poke at it. They can go one-on-one with her and make it really difficult for her to distribute, for her to enter into the post. And then where you have a little bit of a height disadvantage, they were able to then instead double on the inside, send a really quick double team to poke at the ball on the entry pass, so it wasn't even getting in there to Taylor Jones, to Kyla Oldacre. And that's an adjustment from when they were beat by Texas. But it's an adjustment that Texas should have been able to anticipate and should have been able to adjust to, and they simply didn't. In a game like that, when Shea Holly then goes 0 for 7 from the floor, when that's your number 1 3-point threat, that's just not going to be enough. And so, especially as I said, when you lose, when you get exposed, don't be surprised when it happens again, because teams are looking at the film. That's what teams are going to be looking at when they get matched up against Texas in the postseason. If it were me, I would be really sitting there crossing my fingers and hoping that I'm not going up against an ACC team if I'm Texas, because that is a defensive conference. That is a conference that, despite the fact that they probably wouldn't have the size to compete inside, they're going to pressure you in the half court. They're going to pressure you in the full court. They're going to make you have to make really good split-second decisions. And if you don't, they're going to make you pay.
That's such a good.
No, it's literally like, it's honestly interesting because Texas has some of them, might be the most like size depth, like not like, so you have like the size itself and then you have multiple players that have the size. And yet sometimes it just doesn't matter because of the way that players can just completely play off your perimeter players. Like, the way of like the help side that South Carolina would play, they would just completely ignore half the floor.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, you can't win a national championship with 5-minute drought scoring. And it's not just the South Carolina game. Like we saw even the LSU game. Michaela Williams in foul trouble. Flau'jae Johnson is out. Anissa Morrow is out. You are playing against the bench of LSU and you can't pull away. Right? And LSU is not a team known for their depth, to be just very frank here. Like they're not. Like they have their stars. And all of their stars were limited or out. And you weren't able to pull away. We saw at the end of the SEC play, even after that really great stretch of wins where they beat South Carolina, Kentucky, LSU. Even then, like you saw some of these games against like lower level SEC opponents where we're like, they're not really pulling away. Like this is close. Like you have to like watch the game to the end to be like, could the other team make a run here and potentially like upset Texas? Yeah. And you're just putting so much weight on Madison Booker and asking her to do so much. And a lot of that, like, I want to give credit to South Carolina's defense for this game in particular because, like, they were great on Madison Booker. They were great in the first game against Madison Booker. Madison had a better game at home. But, ultimately, to me, this is a Texas problem. like this certainly didn't help when you're playing against South Carolina. But this is a Texas problem. You're seeing the same issues, to Jamie's point, again and again and again. And I don't know. The closest thing to me that they've had to an answer to this is their freshman Jordan Lee off the bench and the potential that she has to be a 3-point shooter. And she had a really, really strong the end of non-conference into the end of SEC play shooting from three, and then honestly started struggling in like the latter half of SEC conference play from shooting the three. And it's not like she's playing an offense that exactly encourages three. So if you're not making them, like I don't think
you
got to
find them yourself. We don't set them up for you.
Exactly. And so if you're not making them like the way that she was, because she was at an incredible clip. I think she's at, it was 37%, I think, so far of the season. Yeah, 37% from three, with about 2.5 attempts per game. And a lot of that came earlier in the season, like the attempt, like the volume stat comes from earlier in the season. And she's a player to me that, like, I think in the future is going to be fantastic next to Madison Booker if they kind of, you have to evolve. You have to evolve. Like this offense, like I don't know if with this floor spacing if you could win a national championship. I just simply don't. I don't know. And then certainly not with the scoring.
It's so
drops.
much coming from the free throw line. Like not just you don't shoot threes, but you're not even really dominating in the half court. Again, we talk about the half court. We talk about the half court with Notre Dame. Okay, so if over 20% of your points are coming from the free throw line and you're playing against a team that's really good at not putting themselves in a position to foul, where does that put you?
Yeah.
And if you're known for your defense yet still have scoring droughts, like, like it's honestly it's a very similar point to Notre Dame. It's different, but like the generalities of it are very similar. Of like, if your defense isn't scoring, like, you might be able to stay in games, but like who like, do I trust Texas to be able to go on a 7-0 run with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter to go and secure a win? No, I don't trust them to do that right now. And that is, again, they have their strengths, absolutely. And there's going to be certain matchups where they can just, like, I don't expect them to get upset early because of how strong their strengths are, whether it be on the defensive end or the size. But goodness, like there is some worries.
I said they should hope not to face an ACC team. If you put Texas and Notre Dame as the 1 and 2 in the same region, we could get one of the all-time ugliest Elite Eight matchups of all time.
Yeah. That would be
like, what was it last year?
If they were at the bottom of their
potential. Like the Duke UConn one, that was nasty. Is that what it was?
Which one was it?
Was that last year?
No, there was a Sweet 16 of UConn and Ohio State. That was a whole.
Is that what I'm thinking of?
I think
regardless,
it could look like a Duke North Carolina game where you have like 20 total points at halftime.
Which is crazy because there's so much offensive talent on these teams. Yeah. Like genuinely, like Madison Booker is one of the best bucket getters in the nation.
Like I think both of them turned it around, but the potential, like what we've seen at the bottom, is
that's where I'm at with it. Where it's like either of these teams could make a Final Four, and I wouldn't be surprised. But if you also told me, hey, they got eliminated in the Sweet 16, like I could probably tell you what issues got them eliminated. Like it's pretty clear to me right now, and that's a dangerous thing to have your issues be this vibrant when there's such short amount of time to scout in the NCAA tournament. So people already kind of have an idea of what's going on. You're making life just easier for your opponent to potentially find the weak points in that.
Yeah, and there are so many teams that are really relying on the 3-point shot because that's such like a big thing in basketball. It's what players really want to perfect before they try and go pro because it's such a big thing in the WNBA as well. So like there's such a heavy reliance on 3-point shooting, and you think about all these teams who have these like 3-point shooting that's how they operate. And I mean, I know the SEC is a very like big dominated front court heavy conference, but like to Jamie's point, if they end up in a bracket with not even like a Notre Dame as a 2 seed, but like as another, like with another even lower seeded, but like very guard heavy defensive 3-point shooting team, then they could like, it could even be earlier. Like to me, I'm like, if there's any team that is a top seed that could be upset first, it would have to be the right situation. But, like, it wouldn't surprise me if it was Texas. Like, I think about so many of these teams that could just, like, unload the clip from 3. And
I'll tell you right now, you know who Texas doesn't want to see? In, like, the first team, like, as we're thinking about this, I'm like, okay, what team am I thinking of? It's Florida State.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Like, that would be rough. Like,
Or the
that
snake
is...
or like a Michaela Blake's 50-piece run.
Yeah, that can get anybody, though.
Yeah,
Michaela,
that's Michaela Blake can get anyone on a
But
Yeah.
like
trip.
Michaela Timpson, like
Yeah,
Timpson
exactly.
inside, like that's where she
With the
has
perimeter
the
scoring.
length, the strength, where she's gonna be in a position where I would bet a lot of money that you're seeing a lot of fouls from both Oldacre and Jones against someone like Timpson. Like
Mhm.
that, you want to know what mitigates advantages, especially in the post, is when you can get them in foul trouble.
Gotta be on the floor.
TCU, we've seen it.
Mhm.
I mean, that's something that Texas has struggled with historically in tough matchups.
Mhm.
And then that's not even getting into the fact that this also goes back to who ends up officiating your games, because you're going to be seeing officials that you haven't seen
Let's
all
go.
year.
Tournament time.
Oh,
Tournament time.
let's all yell about the
And
refs.
it could get really messy.
Yeah.
Really fast. The jacket gonna be off in 30 seconds flat.
Mhm.
You know what's gonna happen? Some of those Sephora shirts are gonna come off, and they're gonna come back on as NCAA ref
Right.
shirts. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But
Right.
They haven't. They have current NCAA refs. We had Iowa State had a ref
Yeah.
that had refed a game of ours a week prior, and I went down to Unrivaled, and I'm like, oh, okay.
get your
job.
coin,
Yeah,
I
we're
guess.
down here.
But,
I see.
yeah, get your coin. Bring the Sephora shirts to the NCAA tournament. That'd be fun. Oh man. Okay, let's flip to the Big Ten because we just need to say. Okay, here's my tip for all of you. The next time that we have a battle of LA, and this
Pick
guy
opposite of me.
do not
Just pick opposite of me.
Tyler, because every time this guy comes on and he says, "Oh, I think this team's gonna win the Battle of LA," the other team wins. He went on twice and said UCLA was gonna win. USC beat them. Then he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, women of Troy. I think you're gonna win this time." Boom, no. Anyway, we got what we wanted. We got a UCLA USC rematch in the Big Ten final. First time both of these teams are in the conference, and then they make the final, which is hilarious. But I also found it funny that it was like these two California teams are just like playing in Indiana for a championship. Like,
Shout out conference realignment.
yep. But it was the Big Ten tournament for me was just like it was so fun. Like, I think maybe just because again, that's the conference that I watch a lot of, so it was just like, okay, these matchups are really exciting. You know the potential, the stakes, yada yada. But like it was just like that final. It was like USC was going on a tear, and then UCLA was like, nope, not a third time, and just completely came. Lauren Betts was on her A game.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone, oh man, it was just like there's certain things, and I mean USC. Like I said, like this is a matchup where I'm not surprised it could go either way on any night. Like, not saying that USC has like, oh, they need to think about this and this and this. Like, it happens. You had one. It's very hard to beat the same team 3 times in a month because they're gonna go back. They're gonna watch the film. They're gonna know exactly how to beat you. And especially when it's a rivalry like this, where this is becoming one of the best rivalries in the country. Because one, you're down the street from each other. It's like a city thing. And then you also have this much talent, like, on both sides. So it's just like, oh, it was great. And, like, Juju had a great tournament as a whole. Lauren Betts came in that last game and just absolutely dominated. There were so many role players on each team that really just, like, stepped up when they needed to. Yeah. So, first of all, Tyler, how do you feel that you have been stomped for a third time?
You know what, man? It is what it is. You know, it is what it is. I'll tell you right now, I'm just happy that everyone in the Big Ten matched the Battle of LA's energy of just beefing. Like whether it was like Iowa, Ohio State,
Yep.
you know, Juju and Silas Swords had their little moment, which was phenomenal. I have so many thoughts about this game, to be honest with you. I'll tell you, the very first thing that comes to mind is Lauren Betts decided that UCLA was not going to lose this game.
No.
And that second half. So I remember there was, I forget exactly the moment, but I was watching the AmeriCup a couple years ago with Lauren Betts when she was on Team USA. I promise there's a reason for
this is like a U17 AmeriCup or a U19 AmeriCup? Okay.
Yeah, one of those. And I think I tweeted about it. There's a tweet out there somewhere about it. I think I clicked it. But regardless, there was a moment where Lauren Betts just like took over and started communicating everywhere.
Yeah.
And I know, like, on the broadcast, like, you can, I mean, it's not like it wasn't some very packed arena. Like, you could hear it. You could hear, like, clapping, like, not like negatively, but like clapping at her teammates, like, get here, get there, do this, do that. And like on defense, like, she is the eyes and ears for the entire defense.
She can see above everyone.
She can, like, I mean, she's fantastic to do that, to be in that role. And in this game, in that second half, there was a moment, she's at the top of the key, and someone's not where they're supposed to be on offense, and she's collapsed. And it, like, I swear, it echoed across Indianapolis. She claps and points and tells someone to get to their spot, and I was like, oh my goodness, UCLA is going to win this game.
Yeah,
and like, it's such a little thing, but like, that's where I realized, like, Lauren Beck's not going to let them lose this game. And like, I loved to see UCLA taking this game personally, and they should, and like, they already were. Like, it's a rivalry game, but like, I mean, I think that they genuinely felt that they needed to take a look in the mirror and prove to the nation that UCLA is not some fluky team. And yes, the USC games, like, they finally made the adjustments that they were there. Like, initially they were just throwing more bodies at Juju, and I feel like USC kind of ended up figuring that out. Mm-hmm. But in the second half, throwing Dugalich and throwing Jaquez at Juju worked phenomenally. I'm like, man, it took us to game 3 to try this out. Because I had talked about, like, you know, the idea of, like, they don't really have, like, that exact type of player that's kind of like the middle ground, like, to guard Juju. Like, you have the guards that are too small and the bigs that might not have the mobility that you need to guard Juju. And they kind of found their middle ground, and it did it with help as well. But I mean, they figured it out, and it's kind of becoming a bit of a trend, to be honest, where Juju Watkins has really strong first halves and then kind of slows down in the second half. And Kiki Arielfin has been phenomenal over the past, like, 4, 5, 6 games or so, and wasn't able to really get rolling in this one. And I mean, UCLA is just a tough matchup because you have Lauren Beck, you have Janiyah Barker, like, you have so many players that can defend.
Kiki Rice,
yes, and Kiki Rice is phenomenal, yes. And like in this game, like, there's, again, this was the UCLA that, like, I think I kind of expected to see in game 2, honestly, after the initial one, but it took us to game 3. It is what it is. The first 2 games are in the past, but it came in game 3, and UCLA. Like, I want game 4. Goodness gracious, I don't know if my heart can handle it. No, I'm not picking. If game 4 happens, I'm not picking a team to win. I'm not. I refuse. But I think I'm not worried about
USC. Get canceled. No one gets to win.
Yeah. No. Coin flip. Yes. Yes. Maybe that's how I'll decide who I pick. I'll coin flip, and like you want to
decide your whole bracket. It's just coin flip every matchup.
Honestly, I mean, I'd probably be better than my real bracket, to be honest. But you know, but no, I'm not, like, I don't come away from this game worried about USC. I think a big part of this is also, like, USC went down to the wire in their game, while UCLA got to rest their starters against Ohio State, which I think can kind of contribute to, at the end of the tournament, and how, like, you kind of saw USC kind of out of gas, I felt like, by the end of this game. But I think for Juju, like, there was a little bit of foul hunting that I didn't love in this game as well, where it's like, I think she was, like, playing for the whistle as opposed to playing and getting the whistle at times. But again, I'm not really worried about USC from this as much as I'm like, okay, UCLA, like, they can exhale. And it's major because, I mean, Corey Close has not won this conference before. They have not won the conference tournament before.
She's coaching for her job up in there.
Like this is just and so, like, you get that first, now you beat USC, you win the conference tournament. You're checking these boxes, and now you're running into the NCAA tournament with this momentum, and it's like there's one box left to check. And there's, again, I mean, I've been high on UCLA. I've still been high on UCLA even with USC. Like, it's.
Yeah, again, we know you took them twice.
I did. Look, I don't regret that, you know. And so, like, to me, I still feel pretty much the same about USC. But I feel vindicated about where UCLA is, and I think that these are two these are two teams that we should be seeing in Tampa Bay. Like, if all goes to plan, we should be seeing them both in the Final Four.
Yeah, and a note that I want to make as to people who can guard Juju Watkins, because we saw it in the semifinals.
There you go.
Silas Swords.
The audio listeners can just hear the ruffles.
Hear the flags going. The flags. Shout out Silas Swords holding Juju to 4 points in the first half of that semifinal game. scoring her big one, averaging 21 points in the 3 games and making the Big Ten All-Tournament team as a freshman. Shout out Sila. First freshman in Michigan history to do so. So, you know, I was so impressed, honestly, like not even just because she's Canadian, but like was so impressed with how she was guarding Juju. And Michigan did their homework on that one. Like they came in with a game plan and like it kind of fell off in the end, which like fair, it's a very young team and Juju Watkins is going to Juju Watkins, but like, and Kiki went off in that one as well, like in the semifinal. Went off at the end as well, but I was very impressed with Michigan's run. And you know, we'll talk about Cinderella teams next week, so I'll save my Canadian agenda for that.
Yeah, we already know your pick.
We know. But also, yeah, and another one I want to shout out for USC as well is Avery Howell, because she just can come in and like score a bucket when you need a bucket. And
Malia Samuels was really good too. Like
yes.
Early on in this game was magnificent.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just like you said, like I'm not worried about USC. I'm not worried about Juju in particular or Kiki. It's just like UCLA had this game. Not that they they wanted this matchup. They wanted to see USC in the final, and they were not going to lose that game. It would have been way more concerning for me if UCLA had lost that game, because not even just to the talent, but to like the confidence level that you got to have going into March as a team that is a championship favorite. And UCLA needed this win to be able to go in with the peak amount of confidence that they could possibly have. They got their, they got their revenge. They got their Big Ten championship. They beat Juju in USC. And now, I mean, we'll see what I want game 4. Give me game 4. But, incredible. Jamie, what do you think about all of this?
I'll keep it quick. I feel like we've hit the big points. But, I mean, my big thing is in the final regular season matchup between the two teams, I said I felt like if UCLA lost again, they weren't a serious national title contender. And so I think that they still have, for sure, like the utter potential to make a big run. I think to lose 2 games in a very similar way is still not a good look. And needing to take it to the 3rd one, great. You made the adjustments. You did it. But it did take you that many. I think that they have so much upside. Again, a lot of this comes down to matchups. There's a lot of teams that simply are not going to be able to guard Lauren Betts in any way, shape, or form. That makes them a lot less likely to be upset early in the tournament. But then as you get down to the wire, when you get up against teams that do have better matchups, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Defensively, I think that they were really solid. That's the thing, is that so many of UCLA's strengths are what makes teams really good in the postseason. So having solid defense, having depth, having experience, all of those things very much work in UCLA's favor. So the fact that you can bring in a bunch of players off the bench that are going to produce at a high level, massive when you're playing multiple games in short stretches of time. Having players that have been there before, that have played consequential postseason basketball, that it's not their first time there, massive. I mean, especially you look at from an efficiency standpoint, kind of the golden rule is if a player has about the same amount of shots as points, you'll usually take that. So for a high volume scorer like Juju Watkins, where she has 29 points on 28 field goal attempts, that's a pretty good defensive outing from UCLA's standpoint. And so that's where you say, okay, you were able to do this here. How consistently can you do that to opposing teams? They have over the course of the year, but against the very best of the best, that's what we're going to see when we get into primarily the 2nd weekend, potentially the 3rd weekend. So I'm not saying, don't pick them as your national champion. There's no shot. Are they my pick? I don't know. Not until I see the matchups. But there's still some questions that winning the one game doesn't solve, doesn't answer. But it means that the upside, the potential that we've seen all season is certainly still there.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that next, because next week we'll have the brackets in front of us. We'll be able to specifically say who's where and whose team's matching up with who. But Yeah, so we'll get to that next week. But for now, great conference tournaments. There's more conference tournaments happening this week that you can tune into. And then next week, bracket selection Sunday is this Sunday. So get ready. It's the one time that I am patriotic is for basketball. So we're gonna keep on going on that. So so make sure to check out her hoop stats for all of the stats on your favorite players. We got so much. We got matchups, we got player stats, we got team stats, we got rankings, everything that you have. We also have some great writing coming out in the next few weeks. Everything from previews to, everything, profiles, interviews, everything. So make sure to check out her hoop stats as well for that. And yeah, make sure to subscribe here on YouTube because we got lots of podcasts coming out. So for next week, catch us for some selection bracketology picks. And follow each of us on social media, Chelsea, Jamie, and Tyler. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.